Welcome to the Nerd Party.
You are in the House of Proyas, the latest entry in the Houselights series here on the Nerd Party Network. And for this journey through the House of Proyas that we kick off this week with a look at his first feature film, The Crow, I'm one of your hosts, John Mills, and I am joined once again by my compatriots who are guiding me through the tenuous connection between the netherworld and a focused path of revenge. Tristan Riddell as the Skull Cowboy, and Darren Moser as the Crow. Actually,
I'm the little crow.
He is. Well, no, I was going to say that as Dr. Sci-Fi, you built a crow. And you're operating it the way you do.
I'll be the animatronic crow, definitely.
Oh man, that's very steampunk,
isn't it though? Isn't it though? So welcome, guys. Welcome to House of Proyas. Welcome everybody to House of Proyas here on the Nerd Party Network. Be sure to go to thenerdparty.com/contact. Drop us a line if you have any ideas, directors you want us to talk about. Go over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a star rating and review. We would really, really appreciate it. And of course, you can reach out to the network on Twitter at Join Nerd Party and look for the Nerd Party on Facebook and Instagram. So here we are, House of Proyas. If you were listening last week, you know I'm extremely excited to talk about The Crow because I was old enough to see this in the theaters. I was old enough to have read the comics. I was old enough to have been swept up in all of the hype that went around The Crow.
You're the Crow expert tonight.
No, I simply am the only one that was old enough at the time to actually care about The Crow.
In 94.
So, yes, 1994. I was a full-grown adult, and you two were still, 5 and 6 years old?
No, I would have been I've been fourth grade.
There you go.
Yeah,
I was way off.
I was 8 years old.
I was way, way off there. But I'm presuming both of you did not see this in the movie theater. So I'm going to kick it over to you, Darren. Your first encounter with The Crow, directed by Alex Proyas, starring the late Brandon Lee, was for...
Oh, I'm trying to think when I would have seen... I feel like I watched like the first 10 minutes of it and then just wasn't digging it and didn't watch the whole thing. Or this feels like one of those movies I caught like on TV when it was playing and just got a snippet of it somewhere, 10, 20 years ago. But but watching it for the first time all the way through, or at least in memory, would be this week.
Wow.
But which I think is great because I think I can really appreciate it as I think it was a great story. And I think it's very 90s. It's got a banger of a miniature. They love flying over that city. Apparently that's what the director liked the most. And then he made a whole movie about the miniature, which we'll probably get to next week. But
the thing is, the miniature actually stemmed at least partly, or their fixation with it and their use of miniatures for a car chase in the movie stems from some mishaps having to do with what happened on set, and not just the most famous thing that befell the cast and crew. But this was a plagued production. A lot of people considered it cursed from the beginning. An electrician got horribly burned when a crane touched a live power line. A disgruntled worker in the plaster shop, or like a sculptor, got really angry one day and drove his car through the shop. You had an actual equipment van burst into flame at one point. Brandon Lee, during the filming of the scene where he goes and he busts up the pawn shop, actually cut his hand on the breakaway glass, which is an extremely rare thing to happen. And a person at the time made a reference saying, be careful, we don't want anything terrible to happen on set, or words to that effect. And of course, later something terrible did happen on set. We're not going to hit on that just yet, because Tristan, you said last week you had seen The Crow all the way through before, correct? And so how many times have you seen it? Is this viewing number 2 for you?
I think this is viewing number 2. Yeah, it was actually, as I was talking last week, I was like, when you brought up that you wanted to do Proyas, I was like, oh, that'll be a chance to see The Crow again. And then I was like, wait, have I seen The Crow? Yes, of course I've seen The Crow. And then I was like, I have forgotten everything about it. I've forgotten everything about The Crow. But then when I watched it, I was like, remember every single thing about The Crow. It was a weird thing. I can't describe it about how I could.
The synapses refiring.
Yeah, like as I was watching, I was just like, oh no, I remember that scene. I remember how that person died. I remember how that person died. I remember how that person died.
No,
but I think this is 2 or 3. 2 or 3. 3 max.
Well, and it makes sense to me that you would have that memory stirred by rewatching it, because this is really it. You know, we're all very visual people. We love film. We watch lots of film. We've studied film. We've done all of these things. And Proyas definitely makes a style statement with this film. And the director of photography made a huge style statement with the way that they shot everything, because they originally wanted it to be in black and white, but the studio balked at that. And so they
this would have been amazing in black and white.
Right. And the original comic was in black and white, which is why Proyas wanted to do it that way and simply have the flashbacks in color. And the reason that the color saturations are done in a certain way is because they shot it with a sepia filter, and then they basically like drained it by adding tons of blue. And so they had actual rules on set about avoiding the use of the color blue. There were even smoke machines where the smoke was a little bluish, and they took them out because they said, once we go in and we do the saturations in post, that's going to look absolutely way too blown out. And so they steered completely away from using those smoke machines or the color blue on set. And it explains also why so many things in it seem monochromatic and even flat in certain aspects with the use of backdrops.
And it's almost always night.
Yes, which also is at least partly explained by the fact that a hurricane wound up damaging part of the set, and it drove them indoors. It was supposed to be shot outdoors a lot more than it was. And so again, we return to the legend of this film.
I mean, it did feel a little soundstagey and backlotty. Like you could tell, like, okay, this is this little alleyway, and this, main street. Like it feels like you're on, the back lot, which again isn't terrible. It's just, it felt that way a little bit. It was kind of like a high budget, long running music video. Not that it had music in it as much, but I mean, it did obviously, but as opposed to like singing through the whole thing, but it just had that same kind of vibe. Like it's very stylistic, very chosen, like, they're distinct in what they want and what they want to see.
Right. And, Proyas he definitely makes a statement here to your point about the music. The soundtrack for this was probably even more successful than the film. I remember at the time, and I have a friend who saw this and did not enjoy it. The legendary Joey, who, if anybody has listened to me talk for any appreciable amount of time, Joey comes up in a lot of stories from my past because we both went to see so many movies together. Joey did not care for this movie. And so as soon as there was an ad saying, see The Crow, it was words to the effect of see The Crow with the number one soundtrack in America or something like, it was a very cheap marketing gimmick. He considered that evidence that the movie sucked, and tried to, lord that over me as see, they can't talk about how good the movie is. They can only talk about the soundtrack. But the soundtrack, you want to talk about just an absolute 90s soundtrack right here. Defining, if anybody here that I'm talking to or is listening wants any sort of semblance of the really popular music with the cool kids and me in the 1990s, this soundtrack is absolutely a complete. It's like a mixtape. It's a perfect mixtape of what the cool kids were listening to in the 1990s, and me.
Even beyond music, this movie is so 90s.
The vibe.
From the vibe, the action, the editing, the design, the use of flashbacks, the specific editing and flashbacks and everything like that. The only way it could have been more 90s is if Draven was wearing a mesh neon shirt. Like that's the only way it could have been more 90s. And I, like, as I was watching it and trying to analyze it, I was just, I kept thinking it was just like so many of these decisions. Like you can tell that this is Proyas' first feature because he is so dictated by the times. That's not a knock. That's not an insult. It's just a lot of freshman filmmakers utilize techniques that are very popular at the time instead of their own vision because they don't know what their own vision is yet. But at the same time, like when you see this, like Darren was mentioning earlier, like you could tell this has a stamp of style to it. And but yeah, the music, like I had my first cousin was obsessed with The Crow. Like he like this is his type of music. Like he's a big music buff, and like his favorite band is Depeche Mode. You know, like that's
yeah,
and,
okay.
yeah, exactly. And actually, a little bit of a tangent. I did go as I know that I've only seen this like 2 or 3 times in my entire life, but I did go as the Crow one year for Halloween,
Nice.
like to a teenage Halloween party.
In 2015, it was really weird. Nobody
Nobody got the
knew
reference.
what he was. Are you a mime? Are you a goth mime?
But see, what's great is that I think that there is a very clear, because Tristan, I know you're a huge Batman fan like myself. I think that there is a very clear line drawn between The Crow and sort of some of the stuff that Heath Ledger did with the Joker. There's definitely an imprint there with the way that the makeup was approached.
Oh, like
all of that stuff.
When Draven was actually applying his makeup, like with his own hands, I was actually thinking to myself, "Oh, I bet that's how the Joker does it every morning." Because like in The Dark Knight, we see his fingers are always caked with white makeup, and so yeah, it's funny that you bring that up because that was one of the first things that I thought of seeing it post Dark Knight for the first time.
And to add the feeling of the makeup being quite right or exactly what they wanted, Brandon Lee wasn't thrilled with the way it looked, and neither was Proyas. And so they adopted the habit of Lee putting the makeup on before he went to bed so that when he woke up in the morning, it would look less than perfect. But to make sure that the lips and the eyes were always right, they had actually created a cast of his face so that the black makeup would always go on in the right spots so that it would never look inconsistent, which is super interesting because those masks come in, and we've danced around it here. But even though you guys were younger at the time, were you aware of what happened to Brandon Lee at the time? Did that news break into your world?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it was one of those things where the name Lee, like not everybody knew who Brandon Lee was because he hadn't done too much before this, but everybody knew and knows who Bruce Lee is. And so when you hear all the headlines of Bruce Lee's son, like dies on a movie set, like that kind of triggers a memory response.
It does. It also triggered a lot of conspiracy theories about what happened. It triggered a lot of speculation about what happened, and it also caused a lot of rules to be changed with the way guns were handled on sets. It was supposed to have been done after this in such a way to prevent accidents like this from happening again. Now, of course, especially with recent news, we know that doesn't always work. And so basically, the short version of what happened with Lee's death is that the firearms expert wasn't on set when they decided to fire the gun, and the barrel was not cleared. And as a result, even though there wasn't a full charge packed in the blank, there was still something in the barrel that winds up killing Brandon Lee. Now, I don't want to stay focused on it, but what I want to do is I want to take that in a more positive direction. And Darren, I'll ask you, with the performance that you saw from Lee, do you think that this was a star-making turn? Let's ignore the tragedy that happens to him. Do you think that this is the movie that catapults Brandon Lee to that next level of stardom? Because he'd been in a lot of B-level stuff before this. Do you think this would have been the one that would catapult him?
I think so. I mean, it's interesting how, because of the accident, he became infamous in a way, not as opposed to famous, but because he is the movie. I mean, every scene he's in, every motion, like there's no doubt of like who is the driving force of this film, and it is Brandon, and he brings such an amazing performance to this character. And yeah, I definitely think people would be lining up and being like, okay, I want him in my next. Now, I don't know if it would typecast him as the, goth movie guy or how that would work, but I think, I think it would definitely propel his career upward.
I know that he had actually said in interviews leading up to the movie while the movie was being filmed and stuff like that, we had joked around sort of the way Michael Keaton had when he was in Batman 89, saying he didn't want to be in The Crow 18. He said, this is something I'll do, and we'll see where the future holds and everything. He says, but I have no intention of being the Crow for the rest of my life. But all things being equal, I would have traded what happened to him for him being the Crow for his entire career. That would have been fine by me. So, and of course, the film did spur on sequels that took some slightly different approaches.
Diminishing return sequels, as they often are.
Yes, I did see the one that was released to theater afterward, The Crow City of Angels, and it didn't quite hit the same stride that this one did. But Tristan, same question to you. Do you think that there is enough positive in this? Do you think that Lee comes out of this a star, or do you think that he's regarded posthumously as a star because of added factors in people's consideration of things?
It's kind of hard to separate it. It's really hard to separate it from history and try to guess, because when you look back at, like we've talked about the Joker a couple of times, and the face paint was an inspiration, and some, I think even some body movements were some inspiration and everything like that. But like when you look at Heath Ledger dying, now obviously it's not a 1-to-1. It's not like he didn't die on set or anything like that. I'm not saying that, but like when you look at Heath Ledger dying before the movie was released, the performance was fantastic. Like no one can argue differently than that. Like it was fantastic regardless of whether or not he survived to the premiere. With this, I feel like this is more of a cult classic than something that like just rammed through the theaters and reached, The Dark Knight reached 2 billion, and before that ever happened before. And with a comic book movie. And with The Crow, I feel like it was one of those things where it was plagued by, I'm giving a really long answer, but like it was plagued by, like you said, like people thought it was cursed. Like they try to cut corners. I think somebody said they were trying to make a $30 million movie for 18 million.
Yep.
And, but I think it's one of those movies that like kind of thrived because of the superstition surrounding it, because there was tragedy on set, and because it has such an indie feel to it. And it's one of those things that like goth kids get obsessed with, and where it's Dwight Schrute's favorite movie. And also I'm just going to outright
gotta put
say
that in
it.
there.
Yeah.
I had to put it in there somewhere. I'm going to outright and say it, is that Brandon Lee is an atrocious actor in this. Like he's just god awful, just awful. And so I have to say a resounding no, because I think if he did survive and there was no, conspiracy theories surrounding this movie, no tragedy, this movie would be like, I think it would still become a cult classic, but I think he would have either given up acting or just gone and had a few side roles before it started picking up steam with the DVD market years later.
I cannot disagree with that more. I genuinely cannot. I think that this is an Oscar-worthy performance? No, I do not. And that's always the qualifier that that's the damning with faint praise sort of move there. But I do think that, to Darren's point, I do think that Lee brings an energy to it that's interesting. That is, for lack of a better word, fun. I can tell that Lee is committed to this and he is all in. I think that any of the any of the things that could be attributed to a performance shortcoming are actually just shortcomings on the part of the film, and those shortcomings are due to the fact that they went back and they rewrote things and they manipulated things in such a way they actually softened the tone of this movie very much, because there was originally the character of the Skull Cowboy. They actually shot scenes with him. Proyas said in a commentary that they struck the Skull Cowboy before Lee's death, but according to a lot of other sources, they struck the Skull Cowboy after Lee's death. And the Skull Cowboy was actually a character who was a counselor. He was like an otherworldly counselor, sort of the way that they have a counselor like that in Spawn. You can actually see a lot of things in Spawn that were kind of lifted from The Crow, from original concepts for The Crow, because the Skull Cowboy.
I was going to say Beetlejuice, but you keep going with
well,
Spawn.
That's really interesting. But I would say that
I saw lots of RoboCop parallels. I mean, he dies in the beginning, then he's basically becomes invincible, and then hunts down all the people that wronged him in his past death, killing them all violently, while the executive who's over them sits, and then is taken out at the end. Like, yeah, I mean, obviously different story, but beat for beat, it has a lot of commonality with Verhoeven's work.
Well, definitely one of the things that they softened after Lee's death, and especially as compared to the comic, is one of the things that the Skull Cowboy was going to hit on was that any time that Eric took an action that was not directly related to getting revenge on the people who had wronged him, he would lose his power. His powers would diminish. And so the whole reason that you see him later taped up with electrical tape on his hands in his midsection is because in the scene where he drives the morphine out of the mom's veins, Fun Boy actually fights him, and the Crow suddenly finds out that he can be hurt, like permanently hurt. And the Skull Cowboy would have explained to him, yeah, because by helping her, you did something that had nothing to do with your mission. And so basically it's like a punishment. And that would have added stakes.
That's interesting.
That would have added stakes at the end, because when he goes off, he's going off to do something at the end that has nothing to do with why he was brought back. And
so
that's
meaning
why,
killing the head of the group, because he technically didn't kill him. He's responsible in a way, but not really.
Right.
Okay.
The Crow's whole motivation is to help the living instead of avenge his death. And that's why at the end, he is much weaker and much more susceptible. And they shoehorned in.
It's not the other way around,
thing.
because what you kind of described of him helping the living with the morphine hurt him.
Correct.
But when he is on his mission of revenge, he's fine.
Right. But at the end, he's going to go help, as opposed to, like, his mission was basically done at that point.
Right. That's true.
And so he was going off, and the Skull Cowboy would have explained to him, if you go off on this, you're putting everything in jeopardy. You're not going to be able to heal, and you might not get your ticket back to the afterworld.
And I like the stuff they did with the anchor, the familiar with the Crow, like where if that's killed or injured, then it cuts his tie.
And that was what was added in order to take the place of the Skull Cowboy.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah. And so, there's a big debate as to which one of those works better. Tristan, given that you've sort of tipped your hand here, would you have preferred to see the version with the Skull
Tipped your
Cowboy?
hand with a megaphone, but
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I really like that idea. I love that idea because it adds some morality.
His Clarence.
Yeah.
telling him what
it
to
adds
do.
some morality and ambiguity to what his mission is, as opposed to a technicality. Like it's with the Crow, it's like, no, this is my connection. It's literal, it's factual, it's technical. But with the morphine and with like trying to take out the mob guy and maybe helping the little girl and everything like that, it's like, no, this is not your mission. Like, you're here for revenge, you're not here for saving, which is something that you usually hear the reverse of, like in these types of movies, where it's just like, no, you're not here for revenge. You're not here to pursue your own goals in your life. You're here to atone, or you're here to, you're here to help people. Like, it's usually the reverse. So I think that's like, yeah, from a dramatic standpoint, from a cinematic standpoint, from a hella nihilistic one, like what, like I think that's really interesting. Yeah.
Well, it also arguably puts the Crow's actions at the end. It elevates the character, because he knows he's risking everything for a noble reason. But this is what I want to do, because I didn't expect you to dislike Lee's performance quite so much, Tristan.
Well, there were times it was really, it was so frustrating, because there were times when he'd come on screen and he'd give a line, and I'm like, oh my God, that's terrifying. Or like, oh, that's super intimidating. And I'm just, and then like, as the scene would go on, I'm just like, why can't you just stay with that kind of energy? Like, give that kind of performance. And it's just like, it was so up and down, up and down, up and down. And it just felt like there were times when I felt like he just read the script right before they yelled action. There were times when I felt like he got the tone completely wrong. And I don't know if it was him, if it was the director, if it was the editing, if it was the production, or a mixture of all of it. But there were so many times when I just rolled my eyes, because I'm just like, good Lord, like, just choose a different profession.
See, I think that the editing is probably what didn't help him, because I know that the creator of the comic, James O'Barr, didn't originally want Lee to take the role. But according to legend, when Lee showed up and performed, he was like, wow, yeah, okay, he gets it. He knows it, because Lee showed up and he gave lines that were from the comic. And O'Barr was, suitably impressed with what he did and was on board with it. And of course, a lot of things go into between performance on set and what happens at the end. I personally am of the opinion that his performance gets undercut by some of the editing choices. That there are moments where I think there are a lot of moments where he really gets it, and it's just not given a chance to breathe for that extra beat that it needs. So I think it's an editing thing. But Darren, over to you. I know that you thought that Lee would take off from this, much like I do, and Tristan does not, apparently. But getting to the editing, what do you think? How do you feel about the editing with this? Do you think that they got it right? Do you think that this was something where, by doing the rewrites, they jumbled things up, and this maybe doesn't flow as well as it should?
Again, I probably give movies more grace out of none, but no, I enjoyed the editing. Because I was interested. I'm like, okay, I kind of vaguely remember this movie, but not really. I did not have the same experience as Tristan of watching it again. Was like, oh, I remember this. I did not remember any of this. So if I had watched it, it was long gone. But no, but because I'm like, okay, what's the story here? What's going on? Who are the main players? There's a Ghostbuster right there. But I liked it, and just weaving through the story, it set its rules and lived by them. So, I mean, already that's good in my book, because it's, okay, this is what the Crow can do, is what he can't do. And then, new superpowers would show up, like the morphine thing. And it's like, okay, like, we're just supernatural at this point. Like, just, I didn't feel like he was overpowered. It just felt like, okay, that fits with his character of him helping the little girl that he loves. And, but it's like, that's cool. I didn't know he could do that. Like, will the morphine out of her. But I'm like, that's badass. That's really cool. And then
it's like a new force power in episode 7, 8, 9.
Yeah, exactly. It's like force healing. I didn't know you had that. But no, I like the story. I think I'll probably watch this again. It was a really enjoyable watch, and because again, it made its rules and stuck with them. You get the payoff at the end. It is what it is, and I think Tristan said it really well. It is a cult film. Is this going to be a great blockbuster? No. It's an exaggerated music video with a well done story at best. But
yeah, I like that.
But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Brandon Lee's performance. I enjoyed, even the kid performance was decent. Ernie Hudson does well.
See,
was the boss guy in Highlander? Because I didn't look it up, but he looked like he walked out of the set of Highlander.
the
Michael
wasn't
Wincott?
Oh
Yeah.
no. He
Okay.
was he was
But were you getting
previously-
Highlander vibes? Because I was. It was kind of a very much you can be only one
Yeah,
kind of thing.
He was sort of a
With a sword, yeah.
Yeah, he was definitely he was a guy that you saw a lot of in the 90s. And he's near and dear to my heart playing Paul Rothschild as the producer Paul Rothschild in The Doors. So, just throwing that out there.
Speaking of which, like all of these side characters, all of the supporting characters were faces that you saw all over the place.
That's true.
I mean, Ernie Hudson, Michael Wincott, Bai Ling, Anna Thompson, David Patrick Kelly, Michael Massey, Tony Todd, Joe Polito. I mean, come on. Like these guys owned the 90s.
I'm glad you brought up Bai Ling. First off, I'll say with David Patrick Kelly, what's great is he was in another you have to like a cult movie, The Warriors from I think it came out in 79.
Yes.
And if anybody's ever heard the line "Warriors come out to
Come
play,"
out and play.
that's him.
Hmm.
That's the guy. And apparently, it was one of Brandon Lee's favorite movies. And when David Kelly showed up on set, Brandon Lee was just over the moon. It's like, oh my gosh, like it was like meeting a hero. But here's what's funny is I'm glad you mentioned Bai Ling, because the legend is that, and I give absolutely no real credence to this, but I feel the need to share it. The legend is that what killed the Rebel Alliance subplot in episode 3 was that Bai Ling did a Playboy shoot and Lucas didn't like that. And so he was like, I'm just cutting the scenes. That is the actual legend from the time.
So she was in episode 3?
Yes,
was cut?
She was in
I didn't know
episode
that.
3.
Yeah, I didn't know any of this.
In a scene that got cut from Bail Organa's apartment, where they're basically talking about the Rebel Alliance.
I have not heard any of this.
The one with
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know
like
this.
Yeah.
the one with the Mon Mothma.
Yes.
I remember seeing those scenes, but I don't remember Bai Ling at all.
Bai Ling was in episode 3. They actually had it on the cover of Playboy that she was in episode 3. And the legend is that Lucas was like, nope, done, out. And then I watch this and I say, did you not see The Crow? Because she's an incestuous occult practitioner who's naked the first time. Like, do you
That's the
think
thing. That's the
you
thing.
know-
Nobody saw The Crow. No, I'm just kidding. No, it
No,
did all right.
I would suspect that George Lucas probably did not see The Crow. But
Well, and I
beg to differ. Like,
recognized
Lucas watches everything.
no, it's like, okay, fair counterpoint.
when I recognized Marco Rodriguez, the detective, turn in your gun and your badge, I hate you, detective. But I recognized from Star Trek, as he's in Next Gen in the episode where he's like the pretend fake captain on the planet, where he's actually trying the good ship Lollipop. And I'm like, I know a Star Trek face when I see one. And
Yeah.
so,
Well, and that carries forward to not to bring the room down, because Tony Todd was also in Star Trek. He was in Deep Space Nine. He was also in Next Generation. Yeah,
He's been in a few Star Trek roles. Yeah,
he also did The Visitor.
Jake.
Yes,
yeah, he was old Jake, older Jake.
And Michael Massey, though, just to mention another guy who was in a lot of films, he was the one that held the gun that shot Lee.
Wait, so I feel bad now. So that was Grange. Which one is that? Was he one of the 3 that killed him? Or
no,
is he
Tony Todd was the right-hand man in the suit and the glasses.
I didn't recognize him. I did not recognize that was Tony Todd, because maybe he was not graveling his voice as much. Because he's got a really distinctive voice, but I did not recognize that as Tony Todd.
I think that cigarettes probably hadn't taken their toll on his voice. But Michael Massey, who played Fun Boy, who was the one that held the gun that was involved
Clarence
in the tragedy.
Boddicker, got it. Okay.
Well, he actually he took a year off from acting, and he said for many years afterward he had nightmares constantly about what had happened on set.
Oh wow!
And
because of the death.
Yes, because he was
the one holding the gun.
Oh,
yeah, he
you're
felt
right.
like
You're
it
right.
was his fault. That's what he felt like. And it's interesting because I've never heard any stories about the cast coming together in this due to the tragedy. a lot of times when a tragedy happens on set or a cast member dies or something happens, you hear a lot of stories. There's usually a lot of press about people coming together to support each other. Have you guys heard anything in the intervening years about the cast coming together or even wanting to reunite at any point?
Let's see. Well, let's
No,
pull out
not even a
Crow Monthly Digest
Oh,
that I have right here. I haven't heard, but it's a good point though. Like you'd feel like that would maybe happen, but I don't think that was really as much of a thing in the 90s of like,
I guess not, because
or at
I
least
would've-
with this group.
I mean, the responsible thing I would think on the part of the production company would be to at least to hire like a post-traumatic counselor for Michael Massey to be like, hey, listen, we got, we will help you here. We'll cover this sort of thing to help him work through it. But it really sounds like he was just cut loose on his own, just to go float out there. He's never seen the movie to this day. He refuses to watch it. I can't blame him. But it's I've always found it somewhat interesting that this was one of those tragedies where everybody just separated and never came back in a support way that I'm aware of. They may have behind the scenes for all I know, because I know that James O'Barr, the creator of The Crow, I think he like bought his mom a car and he bought himself a sound system, and then every dollar after that, he's like, I didn't feel right profiting from this. And so he just donated to charity for years without even saying anything until I guess somebody found out that he did it. And he was like, yeah, well, it's not charity if you tell people about it. So this is definitely a movie that winds up leaving an impression on everybody involved in it, but also an impression on audiences. So, and Darren, I'll throw this to you first. I contend, and I think I said this last week when we were, talking about entering the House of Proyas. I contend that this is a definite direction setter for comic book movies after this. You have one of two tracks to go after 1994. You have the Joel Schumacher track, or you have the Alex Proyas track.
That's true.
How much of a tastemaker do you think The Crow winds up being? Do you think that its impact is still felt? Do you think that it was a flash in the pan? Or, am I crazy for the way I'm thinking? Or
no, I think it definitely has an influence. I mean, unfortunately, it's hard to gauge because everything is overshadowed by the death. Like that is, I mean, heck, like you said, with the death that happened on the Rust shooting, just recently, in 2021, instantly everyone is referencing The Crow because that was the last time it happened. It's been, 30 some odd years since that, we've had a shooting death like that accidentally happen on a film set. And yeah, like Tristan and I said, both of us who have studied film, like, of course, everybody talks about The Crow. Like that is not so much in a, like you would just pose the question of how did it influence, the direction of comic book movies, but more again on safety. Like that's what it's always known for. But yeah, I think of Sin City a lot. I think if they had doubled down, like you said, on the black and white and actually done it like that, I think it would have been, because again, everybody talks about Sin City in that way. And if it had done more of that route, I think it would have been even more memorable or more impactful in that regard. Yeah, that would have been. I mean, it's not like we can't make a black and white version. It's easy to go that direction. You can't go the other direction. But, someone I'm sure out there has made a black and white cut of The Crow where they've edited it and desaturated it even more. And
well, there are two different alternate cuts that have been floating out there for years. One is substantially shorter than the film, and one is a little bit longer than the film. And they're both based on work prints. And one of them, I think, also uses some of the Skull Cowboy footage that was shot for the movie. I've never laid my hands on them. I'm pretty sure that they're floating out there in. They're not on an official streaming service. I can tell you that much. So I would always be interested to see it. But what I want to ask, and I'll kick this to you first, Tristan. When the tragedy happens, Paramount basically, who was going to distribute it, is like, we want nothing to do with this. We're out. Miramax picks it up And Miramax at the time was not yet Miramax. Like it was on the verge of it, but Tarantino hadn't happened yet. Or hadn't really happened. Tarantino wasn't the Tarantino. Tarantino was,
no, I get you.
Just out there. So Miramax steps in with an $8 million addition to the budget. Do you think, a controversial question, do you think this movie should have been allowed to just go away? Or do you think that Miramax made the right call? Or do you think, third option, do you think that this was simply a really hungry production company that said, if we market this right, who cares if somebody died on set? We're going to make a name for ourselves.
Well, I think it's definitely 2 and 3. I think 2 and 3 can exist harmoniously. Miramax didn't do this out of the goodness of their heart. We're talking about Weinstein here. He's not writing an $8 million check because he thinks it's a Brandon Lee's, legacy needed to be preserved.
Good point.
I think that's definitely. I think 3 definitely happened where it's just like, no, let's utilize this free promotion that we're getting. We're getting free ink, free press. And I'm saying this heartless because I'm sure Weinstein did. I personally believe that it should have been finished. I absolutely do. I think that this is a film that sparked a lot of people's imaginations. I think that this was a movie that really loved the source material. And there's a lot of niche fans out there who like the comics who also like this, and I think that the $8 million that they used to go back and finish the scenes was well used. I think it was really well done with how they did it, especially utilizing the technology of the time in 1994. I think they did a fantastic job of inserting doubles and doing face replacements and CGI, droplets and cutting out everything like that.
Was this post Gladiator? I'm trying to remember.
No, Gladiator was in 99 or 2000.
Okay, because Gladiator is heralded as that with that face replacement. Although they did do face replacement with you're right. It's not because of the technology; it's because the actor had passed. That's right.
Yeah.
Because they also did face replacement in Jurassic Park in '93, just the year before.
Yeah, but that was. Yeah, that was comparatively speaking
one shot. Yeah,
they did a really masterful job, I think. As of course, for the time, quote unquote, but I think it still holds up, relatively speaking, because the face replacement was just in like lightning flashes and stuff. It was very brief, so you didn't.
And it was smart. Right. It was smart to do it that way.
Right. You don't have time.
If I didn't know,
really
I wouldn't be like, oh, there's face replacement in this movie. Like, I would have no idea.
I would say the face replacement was done better than Titanic that came out 3 years later. So, I will also say that there was apparently because of that mask that they had created so that they could put the makeup on correctly, they were also going to use it for stunt scenes so that the stunt double would look like Lee. But apparently the mask was so unnerving to everybody who was working on it, they destroyed it and went with CG because they didn't want to look at it on set because it was too much of a visceral reminder. But same question to you, Darren. Do you think that this was the right decision to complete it? Do you think it was a heartless decision to complete it? Or do you think it should have just been left on the shelf?
No, I think it was the right decision. I think... obviously, like Tristan said, there's budget considerations. Like you're literally throwing money away if you're not completing a film. That's how it works. You have all your upfront costs, and then you only get the payoff if you actually release a product. But no, I think, again, it would have been really different if they had shot it, what is it? The word, like in order, in story order, because then he would have passed in the very beginning of the film versus the very end of shooting. But no, I think that it being in the world and being in the world also as a cautionary tale for film production, it's like, that's the Crow's legacy really is what it is. And I think we should have that.
Sort of a final question, because we did talk about the soundtrack earlier. And I know that I think it was Graham Revel did the music, right? For that was not rock music or alternative music at the time.
It's all alternative music.
Yeah, but Graham Revel did the actual score for this. So just to end it on as light a note as possible, Tristan, of the songs that you hear in the film, which one is your favorite?
I think probably putting on his face paint, his makeup.
Burn by The Cure, which was a huge hit and which was written specifically for the film. Yes.
I didn't know it was written specifically for the film. I knew it was The Cure, but I didn't know it was specifically for The Crow.
Yeah, and they rarely, I think they didn't ever play it in concert until many, many years later. But yes, it was a huge hit, which of course delighted James O'Barr because part of The Crow's look was based on Robert Smith, the lead singer of The Cure. So, what about you, Darren? What scene do you think had the best music choice that goes on it?
I mean, Tristan's scene was really good, and just to pick something different, I would say the end with the church. The end scene was, I think, really well done. I couldn't tell you the name of the song, but I think overall, just the music was spot on. I mean, it created the vibe of this film. There was no middle song that popped out, and you're like, "Why? How did this get in here?" And fortunately, with the names of the songs, we didn't have a Qui-Gon's Noble End, on the CD. So
that's very
10
true.
points for that. I'm very easy to please, John. You don't spoil the movie with your CD, and you're good.
That's always a really good thing to do. I will say that I love this soundtrack a whole lot. I had the CD. I still listen to it every so often. I was a huge Nine Inch Nails fan at the time, so I loved they had a cover of Dead Souls by Joy Division. Rollins Band's cover of Ghost Rider is great. As Stone Temple Pilots had a huge hit off of this. The song that was on here was a huge hit, Big Empty. But I will say that probably my tie is, I think that My Life with a Thrill Kill Cult, they had a song called After the Flesh that was used in the scene where he goes and he kills basically like all the mob bosses when he's trying to get to Skank. I've always loved that song. I think I just love the song so much that probably blinds me. I think Burn's a great choice, but I actually love a song from the soundtrack where it is it's the song "It Can't Rain All the Time," which is a really sweet song, and it's really sad and it's really, I think, poignant.
That's true. I did like the Can't Rain All the Time. That one was really sweet, and because it was his song, right? That he had actually written in universe. I like that one,
and I think it's a really good song. Like, it's the type of song that I would actually play for somebody if they were feeling a little low. Just be like, hey, this is all right. You're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. Just listen to the song. You'll be all right. So that brings us to the inevitable question of ratings. And Tristan, I'm terrified of your rating, and I want to end on an up note. So I'm going to start with you. What is your rating of The Crow, and why does it hurt me so?
I think I'm going to give this a 2.5 because my ratings, as I try to explain every once in a while, like on Letterboxd, like 3.5 is good, 3 is liked it, but it has its issues. 2.5 is mediocre, 2 is bad, 1.5 is Walmart bin. I'm going to go 2.5 for mediocre, just because this felt like a very schizophrenic movie to me. There were so many things that were really great and a lot of fun and really cool, and there were other things that were just dog crap. And I think that's what really took me out of it, is that it was so uneven. This was not one of those films where the things that were great were really great, so you could ignore the bad stuff. This one was like, oh wow, this was a really cool scene. Like, he just popped in, or like the way that he hung on the window and threw himself up, or like the way he said this line, like that was really cool. But then you'd have some terrible acting, you have some terrible writing, horrible script, performance issues, like immediately afterwards, and it pulls you out of it. But just when you look at like I love Michael Wincott in it. Like I thought he was just firing on all cylinders, and that weird voice that he came up with, and I thought Ernie Hudson was perfect for this role all the way through it. And there was just a lot of great things with it, but honestly, I'm just going to give it 2.5, where it's a cult classic, and I view it as a cult classic, where it's more of a novelty than something that is particularly great.
That was less painful than I anticipated, so I'm thrilled. Darren, where do you end up with this?
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 3. It's definitely, which for me is like, middle solid film. Nothing that I'm not gonna go out and buy, a copy of it, right now. But no, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the characters. Like I think, like Tristan said, Ernie Hudson's just perfect in that role. And I mean, it's hard to not see him as a Ghostbuster, but I think he did a good job as a cop, and being too old for this stuff and all that. But and again, even the kid acting was palatable. It wasn't too bad. She was in it little enough that it wasn't distracting or anything like that. But for me, I think Brandon, he had the best. He carried the film. He did really, really well. I loved all his scenes. He just had that energy to him in the whole thing. So solid 3.
I will say that if I'm my harsh, honest, critical self, this is a 3, but
nostalgia lens kicks in. And
not even the nostalgia lens so much as I have to respect something that has so much of a signature, so much style, so much, it is so watchable. Right. There are movies that are a 3 where I just, in all honesty, there are 2.5 because I'm probably never going to come back to this. But The Crow has enough going for it that those moments that pull me out are immediately ameliorated by the moments that pull me back in. And I do think it has enough style. It has enough panache. It has enough spirit to it that makes it a compelling watch, even for its shortcomings. So I'm going to wind up giving it a 3.5 because it gets extra credit for those scenes that do work. And I think probably it's not nostalgia, although I'm sure that plays into it a little bit, but I think that there is a respect that I have for this, knowing the production troubles, the simple fact that it got completed and is as good as it is, makes me give it a little bit of extra credit for what it accomplished. So that's where we end up with the first entry here in the House of Proyas. But Darren, where can people end up with you online and out there in the podcast universe, should they want to connect or listen to more?
Well, they can check out my animatronic crows at drsci-fi.com, DRSCIFI. And they can also hear me here on other podcasts on the network, on City Alpha 3, a Star Trek podcast, and on Maker's Method, a making podcast.
Tristan, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me right here on this show, which you've already found me because you're listening. But you can find me on other places on the website, thenerdparty.com, which is our glorious network with new content coming at you every single day of the week. You can find a show that I do with my wife called Nerd Nuptial. You can find a Star Trek show called Punch It, about writing in Star Trek, that I did with Shar. And I also did another Shar show about it's called Second Contact, a Lower Decks commentary podcast. Everybody should check that out as well. John, how about you?
Well, you can find me out there online. Grateful that Rob Zombie never made The Crow 2037 actual movie that was going to be made. Thank you to whoever pulled the plug on that. I am Kessel Junkie, KESSELJUNKIE, over there on your social network of choice. Please connect over on Letterboxd because I can't get myself in trouble on that too much. And you can find me right here also on the network outside of Houselights, appearing on Aggressive Negotiations, a Star Wars podcast with Matthew Rushing. So next, we enter another room in the House of Proyas next week with Dark City, what many people consider to be his true masterpiece. And We'll see how that goes when we enter the next room in the House of Proyas. And in the meantime, please keep the popcorn fresh and the seats warm here on Houselights.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.